Hi everyone, this is On coming to you with this month's video. And wow, June's going to be quite a month, right? We've got some things that are all about embracing the journey and all about going with the flow, basically. And I think these are the challenges that we experience when we are creating big changes in the world and we are trying to make big shifts in the world. Um, it's not just going to be quick, fast, and easy. So many people they want to reside in this space where it's like, I just want it there now. And we have to learn to kind of come back in a little bit and be okay with the time it takes to do things. For those that don't know me, I'm an energy mentor, and you can check out more about my work, the story behind my work over on my website, compassioncodes.com. I'm also the author of this book. Yes, it's a big, thick book. I'm working on it, making some changes for 2027 in it. The Code Journey. And every year I put out a new edition, and this is a great way to kind of see what the nature of the influences are that are coming in. It's a personal growth tool, but it also you can't do just personal stuff, just political stuff. I kind of bring the political video in, the geopolitical things in, because I have a lot of people that like to hear what I have to say around what's happening in the world. This is not a predictive thing, as in, hey, on such and such a date. It's not like those, narratives out there where they say on such and such a date, this is going to be signed and done, and and this is going to make everything better, and everybody's life is going to change, and we're going to wake up one day, and the and the currency is going to be different, and this and that. Life doesn't happen that way. I'm sorry. So if anybody's giving you that kind of information, it's not there. I'm not here to predict things. I'm here to talk about the energy currents that are going on and how that may connect and what types of things we may see. Nothing is an absolute or a definite. I mean, I'm not working from anybody's intel information. And honestly, I don't think you really should either, because most of the so-called intel information out there is probably 98% inaccurate and aren't even from real people. They're networks of people that claim to do things. I saw the latest claim, over the last month. We'll be getting to the June information here in just a minute. One of the latest claims was like 20 priests or ministers are going to receive this information and about aliens. And I just have to laugh because I'm sorry, this is not a priest focused. The priest should be focusing on their congregation. So, what is this? These are people who are pretending to be priests, people who have fake credentials, people who are not really ministers. They're just some false minister in this circle of I don't know, this network of people to make money, and they'll say anything. One time it's priest, one time it's all these Intel CIA people, ex-FBI people, whatever. Um, you know, Again, 98% of it's basically BS. They're just writing with these false narratives being put out there that are designed to keep people hooked in. So please be very careful of these people, because they're not necessarily giving you the truth. It doesn't mean that everything that they're saying is a lie. There may be some foundational truths in there, but when they're giving you all of this stuff like at 3 p.m. on this date, this contract's going to be signed, you know what? That's baloney, honestly. I mean, unless you're getting it and it's on like, a world leader's schedule, that's a different thing, okay? And it's actually listed publicly where anybody can go and look that up. That's a different thing. But when you're getting it through these, other narratives and these other influencers out there, there's so many influencers and so many people pretending to be authentic. Well, certainly you can tell by my numbers, probably very authentic, because, I'm not being paid. Therefore, I don't have all these bots coming into my channel and all of that. So, if you like what I share here, please share it, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate all the help I can get because I am not very big on the channel. But I'm also not out there networked with people, which is why I'm not exploded out there like all of these alleged, and I do say alleged tarot readers because they're really not authentic readers. There's so many people out there proclaiming to be astrologers and tarot readers and this and that, and they're not. They're not. They're just using some very fundamental things that they pulled off the internet. The work I do actually blends over 50 different modalities, practices, belief systems. Um, so it's a wide variety. It's original work. I always love it when people come to me and they say, "Oh, I do what you do." And I'm thinking, no, you don't. You don't do what I do because I'm the only one that's doing what I'm doing. Not to say there aren't people using some of the same pieces and components or ideas because there are, but you know, you can't because I created my own work from decades of learning and experiences, and you haven't had those experiences, so there's no way you're doing my work. Um, I always find that a bit amusing to say the least in this. So let's jump in. What we're looking at is, insights on world events for June of 2026 in this video. And we break it down. I break it down with the months and some different date ranges and things like that, and what we can see in different parts of the month coming up. So, in the overall month energy, what we have going on is there's going to be a big need for patience. And again, I think the longer it takes to do things, people don't take in accountability how much how much goes into making something happen, how many pieces have to be working, how many things have to be integrated, how many people are involved, and they don't they all they see is the end result. So they get very impatient with the results coming through. But there are so many factors at play, and we need to be patient with the process of things. And things are not going to be moving as quickly as people would like or even as anticipated. And why is this? Because whenever you're dealing with people that are involved in criminal syndicates or corruption in the world, especially in world leaders, okay, there are going to be blocks and obstacles. So you might have some really great do-good people out there that might actually be working for the people. Not a lot of them in politics and government, but there are some that do have their hearts in the right place. But because they're having to work with people who are criminals, who are being corrupt, who are doing things that aren't good, um, then, there are going to be blocks and challenges along the way. So we've got to be patient with the process. And the key is, and I'm sorry, my nose is itching really bad today. It always does when I start up videos for some reason. I don't know why that is, but it does. It's always right here in the end. But we've got to see things through. This is a time where we've got to be patient with that process. We've got to embrace what has to be done. We have to do the nurturing. We have to do the caring pieces. So this is a time where it may not feel like things are moving. It may appear as if very little is happening throughout the month. But we've got to stay in that commitment to see things all the way through, because we're not going to get to the results if we don't see things through. And a lot of this is about building future successes. Okay. It's like laying the foundation for a house so that it doesn't fall apart when you build it. You can go out and build a house, but if you don't have a strong foundation for it, it might go sliding down the hillside, or it might sink into the ground, or it's going to have issues, and then your house is going to be tilted, or all kinds of things. So we have to take the time and not just look at what is happening in the moment or what we can do in the moment. That's important too, but also what do we need to do to build the bigger successes? So again, this is not just about going out and going, okay, let's go arrest whoever today, let's go arrest this person today because they've got crimes against humanity. We'll use Bill Gates. Almost both sides don't like Bill Gates. So yeah, we could just go arrest Bill Gates right now if we wanted to. But we have to think about the bigger pieces and the bigger picture. We have to realize that if you go arrest somebody and then they get a trial, for example, in a court where you've got corrupt judges that are sitting, it doesn't matter if you arrest that person because they're not going to be held accountable. And then the more times you keep trying to bring things against them and running through these corrupt courts, the more damaging you hurt yourself, the less successful you can be with things. So we have to consider that. So that means we have to stop and build the courts up first. We have to stop and get people who are ethical as judges. We have to get people who are going to follow the law on things because you can't bring accountability if you don't have people who are following the law making the decisions. Okay. So we got to look at this as a lot of the actions that are being done may not look like they're doing much right now, but they may be laying a lot of foundations for things to happen a few months down the line, a year or two or 5 years down the line. Um, a lot of people are going to be experiencing challenges during the month of June, and this connects to deprivation. So this is going to be a big struggle because you've got the corruption and the criminal syndicate that wants people to feel really deprived right now, especially here in the States where we're coming up on midterm elections. And they want people to feel suffering. They want them to believe they're suffering, even though they're not. And through that, they feel like, okay, if we, as criminals, if we can make you believe you're suffering, then you'll do what we want and we'll be able to maintain power because we're making these other people look like they're the ones creating your suffering. These are all games. That being said, we also have an aspect of deprivation that can feel real to people, right? You go to the gas pump and you're like, why are the gas not coming down? Well, sometimes that's the governor or the senator or people in charge in your state. It's not a federal level thing. Um, we may feel deprived because we're in challenges, but we're not really deprived. And these can be some temporary things. What we need to know during this time is we're not suffering just because we're hitting some challenges, just because things aren't necessarily moving through as fast as we want them to in the way we want to see them. And a lot of things are happening, but they're not happening necessarily in the way that somebody wants to see them. And so they want to believe that they're not happening. We have to be careful what we're looking at there. We have to be careful what we're seeing. So we need to know that we're not suffering during this time. This is a period in a month where there's not going to be free rides. We have to do the work. So we're going to probably see a lot more around our different welfare programs, whether that is SNAP or Medicare or Medicaid or unemployment things that people are getting um, or even Social Security things, disability, and all of this stuff. And this is where we're going to probably see a greater crackdown on fraud going on. And this will be where maybe we'll see some results from efforts that were made quite a while ago and that have been going on ongoing for a while. And we might start to see some of the results of that. But we're going to probably see more fraud cut off the system. And this is a really good thing. As a person that spent most of my life working and is now having to look to some of these benefits at times, and being, at that retirement age and everything like that, that it is it's not, I was always groomed not to take from the system if you don't need it. Okay. But when people really need it, they need it. So the solution is not just blowing up the system and not having it. The solution is getting the fraud off of the system, getting the people off who don't deserve it, the people who just are too lazy or want people to believe that they can't do something that they can do. And it's more, they just want an easy ride. And that's what we're going to be seeing. It's like, no, you're not going to get just an easy ride. Just because you enter the country doesn't mean you're automatically entitled to everything. Just because you don't feel like working a job doesn't mean you get to have all of these benefits. Okay. There's a difference between somebody who can't do it, a difference in somebody who's struggling but trying to help themselves, and somebody who is taking advantage of the system. And the people who take advantage of the system are the ones who are depriving the people who actually need it. And there's plenty for those who need it. There's not enough to just support the world on it. And this is what we have to look for. So no more free rides. So we're probably going to see some more cracking down on fraud, more things coming up on that. Um, and where people are taking advantage of the system, it's going to backfire. So these people who have said, oh, just set up this childcare business or just set up, this type of business and you can funnel all this money through here and you don't have to report this and you don't have to report that. All of that stuff is going to backfire wherever people are taking advantage of the system. So fraud is going to be a big thing coming out. We must be practical with our resources. So we're going to see some things that are going to feel like tightening, or maybe certain things won't be approved. But here again, we got to look at what is being approved and what isn't being approved. The excesses, the unnecessary things are not going to be approved. And why is this? Because we have to get debt and things paid down. As countries, as a world, we have to get out of this debt system. And I know most people think, oh, that's never ever going to happen. I do believe there are ways that it can happen. But it can't happen when we're funding excessive lifestyles, when we're funding all kinds of things that are not necessities, really. Most people don't mind paying for things that are basic necessities, like keeping the roads from falling apart so they can drive to work. That's a necessity. Researching, I don't know, reproductive things of some rare species is not a necessity. Okay. So there's a lot of things out there that are not necessities that funds have been going towards. So we may see a cracking down, and it may appear like there's a cracking down on programs. What the corruption wants you to believe is that there's a cracking down on programs, and that's going to leave all these people deprived, which is not true. What's being cracked down on is the fraud in the programs, which means we're getting responsible about where we're spending money. And, we could see more things coming down, like here in the States, on individual states, where the federal government is no longer going to pay for states who are going to choose things that are not in the benefit of people, that are actually harming people, because they can't participate in those things. They can't keep funding them from a legal aspect. They can't, because that puts them in a position of endangering lives if they do. So if the states are going to move forward with something, that funding has to be pulled. And basically what this is an aspect of, we're not going to fund your corruption. We're not going to fund your criminal network. It's not that we're going to hurt people. We're not going to leave people without. We're not going to leave the people who need their SNAP money without food. We're not doing any of that. But we're not going to allow the fraud. We're not going to, you're going to have to validate it. You're going to have to prove to us where this money is going so that we can justify giving it to you. And this is a big thing. So I think we're going to have a lot there. And I think there's going to be a big focus coming around finances on how to pay off debts and loans. And we might even get some news during the month of June that would give us some idea of, indeed, there are something in motion around the financial system to start paying things off. And again, I know there are ways to do that. And the focus is going to be, how do we create ease, or what frees us up from commitments? Like every country pretty much has all these payment commitments, right? You're exporting things, you're importing things, so you have payment commitments to the countries with importing and exporting. And when we free ourselves of the debts, the running tab that we have, for example, with other countries, they no longer can have power or influence over us. And that's a really important thing. So I think we might see more and more things coming out around the debt coming down, around things getting paid off in there. Um, we're going to see more focus around what is best for us and countries looking at what is best for our country, for our people. And that's important. And a lot of people get in a big whatever to do because it's like, oh my God, you're not putting money into whoever, we're not putting money into the UN, or you're not doing this, or you're not doing that. And, again, we have to take care of us first. You have to think about it. How many countries rely on funding and different things from the United States? Okay. If the United States is not solvent financially, if the United States is struggling, if they cannot take care of their own people, there's no way they can take care of anybody else. We have to be strong enough taking care of ourselves, and then we can take care of other people out there. We can work with the other countries. And we see this over and over again. Even when countries are struggling, we're still funding a lot of this thing. But again, if the countries are going down paths that are harming people, that are working in these criminal syndicates that have crimes against humanity going on. There are some European countries really coming under focus with this. We're not going to fund it. If these countries are supporting terrorists, if these countries are supporting major organizations like certain radical jihadists, I'm not talking about basic Muslim, Islam people. I'm talking about radical extremist jihadist type people, which are really harming a lot of people around the world. Um, so when we're looking at that, um, we're not going to fund countries who are going to channel money to those places. Yes, we're all for helping the people. We're all for making sure that people aren't suffering. But each country has got to stop and look at what's best for them and make those decisions. We must deal with things even if we don't like it. And there are things out there that are in the processes. Everything has its pros and its cons in this world. And some things are going to get sacrificed for other things to be needed. Sometimes you have to turn down the amount of people you're accepting in a country in order to keep the people in the country safe, or you've got to put some restrictions on what type of people are coming into the country. It's wonderful to have, for example, migrants coming in with these different cultures and ideas and beliefs, and they want to build a business, and they really want to make something with their life, and they really want to contribute here. It's something different if you are bringing in criminals and they're coming in and you're bringing in people that are running drugs. Well, now you're not making the safety. So you have to say no to those criminals and, you know, and then make your place safer. There's always going to be a little bit of a trade-off. No matter what, there's always a little bit of trade-off that has to happen. And there are sometimes we have to go through things that aren't pleasant in order to get the bigger result. You look at things around oil or things like that, that sometimes you have to deal with a little bit of increase in price for something, but then when you get that bigger result, that price comes way down. So you have a component in there that we got to look a little bit at the bigger picture, not just the immediate piece, but what's the longer, bigger piece of this that's going on. So I think that there's things that we may have to stop and deal with, and that also could put, a little bit of patience with things. There may be things that come up that, um, you know, we may have to give in a little bit on. And there's certain things, certainly we don't want to give in on. We don't want to be total surveillance. I think we're already really there, in my opinion. We're already under total surveillance, but it could be a lot worse. There's certain things that we don't want to give into, like digital chipping in our brains and our hands and things like that, and total digital world. That's not a good thing, in my opinion. I hope we can avoid that. Um, But there are other things we may have to give into. We may have to give a little bit of leeway on something in order to be able to bring the criminal networks down. So we've got to deal with things. Well, there's no more running, escaping, avoiding things. We've got to deal with whatever is present. And so that's what we're going to see a lot of. And that's not always going to be pleasant, and it's not always going to be enjoyable. It's kind of like, look, you burned through your allowance and this is all you got, and now you got to make that last. It's the same thing. It's like if you want to have a house, you've got to go work and do what you need to do to own it. You've got to, we have to deal with things. And that's just part of life in this world. Now, from the 1st through the 21st, so our first 3 weeks of the month, partnerships are going to be a big key to successes. They're going to be a big part of what works. There's going to be a lot of focus on good fortune for both parties involved in there. And I think we're going to see partnerships coming in even with people who are considered enemies or opposite or in opposition, opposing forces. And this is really an aspect of showing that you can have two different viewpoints, and yet we can balance, we can harmonize, we can work together in partnership, even if we have totally different views of how to run the country, for example. Um, so, for example, the US and China have very different views on how to run their country. It doesn't mean that you can't have respect for certain things in each of those leaders. It doesn't mean necessarily one's right, one's wrong. There's a lot of different things at play that go way beyond the leader of a country in there. And so we are going to see, I think, more partnerships between these opposing forces coming in to keep things in harmony, to keep things in balance. And that is going to be the key to success. It's like government and private partnerships in a way. We might see something, for example, where you have somebody who's strong on the environmental side and a strong environmentalist working with people who are strong builders. And it's kind of like, okay, we need to build something. We need to build this housing for people. And the environmentalist is going to keep them from just going in and destroying stuff unnecessarily with that builder. But the builder is also recognizing the needs of people to have housing versus, an ant being saved, for example. Just using it as an example. Don't anybody go out there and get wild and crazy on me for that. But, the environmentalist and the builder are two opposing forces who can work in harmony. And the environmentalist can say, okay, look, you've got to build X amount of stuff. If we put it in this location on the property versus this location on the property, then we can actually do something. Now, the builder might come back and say, yeah, but if I put it there, we've got unstable ground, and then we're going to just have to rebuild in 5 years, and it's going to create more environmental impact. So if they start talking with one another, they can actually find their balance, create a strong partnership, and maybe build something that is environmentally friendly, that works with the earth a little bit more than just throwing something up that has a low impact to it. When they start talking with each other and recognizing the skills and the wisdom that each has and the impacts that need to be considered, a really strong partnership develops that creates good fortune for both situations. No one side's going to get 100% what they want, but they can come together in a way that brings a successful result that is not totally damaging one way or the other. The strongest people know when to help and when to step back. So we're going to be wanting to watch who knows how to be in this flow, who knows how to be involved, then to step back from something. Um, they they realize that helping is good, but they can't support, again, the fraud, the crime, the manipulators. Okay. So this is that kind of flow, like, yes, we're going to give you money for those who need it. We're not going to give you money for the people who don't need it. Same sort of thing. So I think a lot of that's going to be tied to that. There's going to be a lot of this it's like a wave, going in and out. It's going to come in, it's going to go out. It's going to move forward, it's going to step back a little bit. So I think this is another piece of feeling like things maybe aren't progressing as much as they want, as people want, but they really are still progressing and they are still having a forward momentum to them. But we have to know when to be involved, when not to be involved. You have to know, Trump's actually pretty good at this. He knows when to get involved, when to put the pressure on people, and then when to step back and let them try to resolve something. And his preference is always, you guys resolve it. But if you can't resolve it, you're putting my country in jeopardy, and now I've got to get involved in some way. So, these are the things we're going to see, this sort of back and forth sort of stuff. And again, we don't want to be frustrated by that. We don't want to let that get us down. But there are going to be things probably that are going to be done to try to break our spirits this month during this time. And this is coming from, again, those people who are in criminal syndicates, who are working in corruption, who are involved in the fraud, who are getting kickbacks from the fraud, things like that. And they may try to break our spirit. These people are insecure people, and they are using guilt and they're using shame on people to try to build themselves up in some way, and to put people in a disadvantaged position where they can be controllable. The more people believe they're suffering, the more people believe they're disadvantaged, the more people believe they're helpless and they're powerless and they don't have any value and they don't have any other options, the more controllable they become. And that's where these people are coming from. So if they can get them in that position by breaking their spirit and making them believe there's no hope or no other option, they will guilt and shame people. Oh my gosh, it's like, how much did we see that in COVID, right? If you don't get this job, if you don't do this, if you don't do that, you're a horrible person. You're killing all these people. But who was really killing the people? It was the people forcing the stuff on, because we now know that killed a lot of people in nursing homes, that killed a lot of people in different situations that didn't have to die because they were forced into things, or had things beyond their control. So we have to, it's really those with wealth are trying to keep people poor. And they do this with taxes. And we see this, for example, in California. Now, even though these are richer areas of California, like where the houses go in and get burned, well, what happens? If people's homes burn down, even if they're rich, you got to consider a lot of rich are living on debt and credit. They're not living on real wealth. And so, some of them, yeah, they can afford to build another home. Some of them can't, but it's making them poorer and poorer if they have to keep dealing with these things because the state is not taking care of what needs to be done to prevent those fires in the first place. I think there's already lawsuits that could probably be going about all of that. Like, you guys didn't take the steps needed to prevent this from happening. And, so now you've got to pay us for having to rebuild. And, of course, we know in the state of California, they, like in the Malibu area and some of the areas there, where things broke out in these richer areas, a lot of celebrity homes in there. When those fires broke out, we know that this can be connected to property seizures. We know that, again, they wouldn't give people the permits to rebuild, things like that. So we have to be very careful of this, because a lot of what they're trying to get us to do is to sacrifice morals and values for their own personal power and gain. And, eventually this backfires on them, because when people feel like they have nothing to lose, they will break that aspect of being controlled. A lot of times it's like, I'm going to have nothing no matter which way I go, so I'm going to stop playing this game. And then what happens? Like in a state situation, you get a lot of people leaving that state, and then the state can't fund things. And then they do these things and they allow the fires to happen. And they think that BlackRock or somebody like that can just come in, take over the land and the property. And they think that they're going to be reimbursed by the federal government. Well, that's not going to happen. When we look at these influences, that's exactly the type of fraud that is going to be cut off. And, they're going to come back from the federal government and say, well, you didn't take the necessary steps to prevent this. You shut off your water, you shut off this, you shut off that. And if you hadn't shut off those things, you wouldn't be in this position. So you're going to have to foot the cost for your own mistakes. We're done footing the cost for your mistakes and denying the suggestions that we've made that would keep your people safe. So this is kind of a big thing in there, and we've got to watch where people are asking us to sacrifice spirit, where they're trying to break that spirit, or they're trying to break that hope. And we have to double up and be strong in that. We have to lean harder into God, divine source, and be strong in all of that. We're going to see a focus during these first 3 weeks on taking care of those in need. So we may see more options coming up to help people. So again, this brings in things like Social Security, SNAP, housing, disability, etc. And we may see more things coming up that create some form of exchanges going on. Again, these partnerships that might be going on with these different aspects in there. And really looking again, who's at need, who's not in need, and what can we do to help those who really are in need. So for example, seniors, we've got seniors and their pay was so much lower when they were working, so they don't bring in hardly anything. I know if I had to take early retirement at the end of this year, um, I would be getting very, very little money, very little money. I think it would be around maybe $1,100, if that. Okay. Most people are not going to live on that when you consider housing costs and you have to maintain a vehicle and you have to maintain, other things. That's not going to pay expenses. And even though there are so-called cost of living increases that are coming up, I mean, it's we have to do more for people for people who are truly in need. Again, I don't promote the fraud, but we can't throw the compassion out the window either. So I think there's going to be more looking at how do we make these connections? How do we create these options? And there's oftentimes a lot less expensive options. For example, encouraging people to deal with farmers, encouraging people to eat fruits and vegetables versus candy and sweets and cake and junk food and all of that stuff. There may be more things coming out about working. If you provide volunteer hours, X amount. I know that even on SNAP, they have things like that. If you're under a certain age, you have to work, unless you're on disability or something like that, where you can't, you have to put in X amount of hours to receive those benefits. So you have to go volunteer someplace like 20 hours or whatever amount it is in order to receive those benefits. And that's reasonable. That's reasonable. If you're physically capable of working, you should be able to do that. So looking at all of those different things, I think are important things to do it. You've got to be making a contribution. Again, no more free rides. Now, as we get into that last week and a half of the month, the 22nd on, basically the last week, we're going to see probably some stagnation come in. We got to have flexibility. We've got to have patience with things that are happening. We want to use that time to really connect into values. We really want to connect in. And I think this is something that leaders are going to have to look at. And I think it's going to expose those leaders who are and are not working in some form of divine alignment or some form of values and ethics. And sometimes things can appear as if they're not in value and ethics when they really are, when you start to look at the deeper layers and the bigger picture of it. So we've got to have patience again, because people, they get to these points and they're like, I don't see anything happening. And then they get all upset about things. And it's like, look, there's a lot that's happening, even when it doesn't look at it. There's a lot happening behind the scenes. There's a lot happening beneath the surface. Um, it's kind of like standing on top of a ground area. And it's like, well, all I see is an adobe house there. And, what's happening underneath the ground? Oh, 200,000 people live there. It's a whole city. It's a whole world. There's stores. But you don't see it because you're standing on the surface. Well, this is the same type of thing. We don't see a lot of what's happening. So even when something is in stillness, and sometimes things have to take a break. And we may have to take a break from certain things. And again, this brings our focus back to how do we help the people in need? Sometimes you have to stop and look at something and observe something before you can see what's needed. So don't be afraid of these stillness periods. Don't get riled up and anxious and upset over them. It's just not worth it. We have a lot that's going to be working in spontaneity during this time. So what we have to do is be spontaneous. There's going to be a lot of seizing in the moment. So there's not going to necessarily be all these plans set firm, or even if there are plans, there may be things that come up that have to stop and be addressed. It's just kind of like, you have to sometimes you're on your way to help one child, but then trauma breaks out with the other child, and you have to stop and deal with that because it's a more critical thing to deal with. The same type of thing. The caution we have to do is what leaders are just impulsively pushing and buying into the fear, which is part of what like the WHO is trying to promote. Oh, these countries are going to be in trouble if they don't sign back on with us, or that's fear and urgency. And look at this Ebola outbreak that's happening. Well, guess what? It's only happening in WHO countries. How ironic that it is only happening in the countries that are paying for who's coordinating with the shots from like Gavi and Gates. And there's some interesting connections in that. It's very interesting that it just picks select places to break out. You got to question those things, but we have to seize the moment, but not be impulsive. So we have to take the time to think about things before acting, and that's the smart leader. They won't necessarily, they'll act promptly when something needs to be acted on, but they won't act out of fear and urgency, and they will take the time to look at the situation so they're not just reacting into something. We're also going to see stillness is needed sometimes for balancing and harmonizing. Sometimes we have to stop and bring things into balance. They've gone too far one way or another. So we're going to see a lot of balancing and harmonizing going on that last month, integrating the fragmented pieces. And I think actually that could help people, because sometimes when you take that break and you start going click, 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 and I put all the pieces together, pretty soon it's like, oh, now I'm starting to see the picture. And that's another part of it, is integrating these fragmented pieces. And we're going to start seeing, I think maybe during that last week, how a lot of these different things that people have been upset over are actually all connected. Like I get a lot of people, I get some people that say, well, why are we involved in Iran? Or why are we doing this with Russia or China or this and that? We need to be focusing on our own country here. Well, that's because the issues that are happening there do impact our country, and they do impact the safety of our citizens. So it's not like we're just going and putting our nose in everybody's business out there. We have to stop and realize that these things do impact our country. If Iran got a nuclear weapon, well, that's going to impact the safety of our citizens. So, yeah, we have an invested interest in whether they have a nuclear weapon or not. And we do have to, take actions to prevent that. Now, we may not agree with all the choices around how that is being done, but it has to be done. And so there are different things like that that's like meeting the needs of the moment, and yet not reacting, not getting in there. This balancing and harmonizing is also about honoring two different sides. And this is where we may see things that are whether you want to say nonpartisan or bipartisan type partnerships. Um, and when I think of this, I think one, we could see a surfacing or a rise or a surge in the uniparty group, which is not really about the people. Let's keep that in mind. They just are people pretending to be on two different sides of the fence that are still working for the corruption or the criminal syndicates are taking profits and gains. But people on two different sides of the fence coming together saying, yeah, we can all agree that certain things are not good or certain things are crimes against humanity. And we can all agree on that. So I think we're going to see more of this balancing and this harmonizing, like as I was mentioning before, like with the builder and the environmentalist. Okay, so if this is where we have to build, this are the things that we have to take into consideration. So if you're going to build here, then we need it done with maybe these types of materials or this type of thing or whatever, because the environmentalist might know more about the land and the soil and different things like that that the builder may not be taking into account. So that listening, and I think we're going to see more coming together, more of that harmonizing happening. Extremist corruption, they're going to be seeking power battles. They're going to be seeking to divide people. They're going to be looking to put people in greater positions of fear and dependency, and offering up like conveniences. But our real leaders are not doing that. Our real leaders are saying, look, you need to stand on your own 2 feet. You're capable, you're able, you can have a job, you can do this. And actually, we feed a lot of very positive energy in people when they earn something, when they are able to be strong on their own, when they don't have to rely on people, their confidence surges, their self-worth surges, they become happier. There's all kinds of great benefits when we stop enabling people in being a victim. So I think again, we're going to see this, and this is going to separate out leaders and who's trying to control people and who is trying to bring things forward that will make people strong on their own. And I think we're going to see again more of those people in need, things being presented that will help them to become stronger on their own and less dependent on the government and the systems. And I think this is positive. It's like if we're promoting health, you're going to have less people dependent or needing medical services, which are outrageously expensive, than, than having all these people having all these expensive hospital bills. You go in the hospital for 2 or 3 days, you're in six figures with things. Or, how long would that six figures last you in massage appointments or other things that are far more enjoyable than being in the hospital? How many diseases can be prevented by, you know, getting in and going to the gym or other things like that? There's a lot of things that can be prevented by supporting healthier options. So this is where I think we're going to see some of these things coming through. And leaders who don't work for the people will fall from power during this last week. So we're going to also have an interesting thing to see who is falling from power during that last week of June. And it's going to be because of their greed, because of their arrogance, because they've surrounded themselves with people who are not very smart. These are the people that are putting hardships and control on people. So think of those countries who exercise a lot of control over people. They want to do it. And even the organizations, again, the WHO has tried to do this. The UN has tried to do this. Look at Europe, your EU, and what they're doing, how much power, how much restriction that they are putting on people for things, trying to tell them it's in their best interest when it's not. The raising of taxes on things. We're seeing a lot happen in Australia area. So anything requiring us to turn our power over to others basically is not in our best interest. Turning our power over to AI is not in our best interest. Letting AI decide things for us is not in our best interest. Letting governments decide everything for us is not in our best interest. Um, it's governments are meant to uphold law. regulations, constitutions, things like that. They're not there to tell people how to live their life. And these are very big, important things. Now, when we look at the action energy and what's coming up with that, the actions we're most likely to see taken. Again, there's a lot of observation, and this is through most of the month, the 1st through the 28th of the month. Um, and this is giving people this observation time is not an inactive time. It's more of a brainstorming time. It's giving people a chance to stop and look at different perspectives on things, look at things from different views. And whether you like Trump or not, he does this a lot. He stops and he goes, if I was the ruler of China, if I was sitting in Xi's shoes, what would I do? If I was the ruler of Cuba, what would I do? And from their mindset, and he actually goes in and looks at it from their mindset, what they would be doing. So he looks at these different perspectives and he looks at things and saying, if I was sitting in their shoes and I had these resources, what would I want? What would I need? What would be my power? What would be my weakness? And then that's what he uses to make his deals. And it's that factor of, okay, this is what they need. This is what we want. How do we make that work? And so I think the actions are really more of an evaluating time, and you have to do this. Anytime you're creating something, when you're building a company, when you are building a business, when you're building a life or a family or anything, there's times you have to stop and observe and say, wow, that's not a 4-year child anymore. They're a teenager. I gotta probably deal with them a little bit differently than I would that 4-year-old child, right? Same kind of concept. Sometimes you have to just stop and evaluate things. You have to look at where they are. You have to stop and go, yeah, as an adult, this is what I'm thinking. But from that child's point of view, what are they thinking? And you have to look at it from that perspective as well. So very big pieces there. A lot of unclear or unrational thinking. So this is, again, the people in the criminal syndicates, the people wanting power and control, probably going to be very unrational about things, but the mind is just not clear. The good thing is that's intuitive. Now, you've got some leaders who are very good with intuition and some leaders who are not. And it'll be interesting to see who listens, who can work that way. And this is another reason why it may be hard to say we're going to go do this or we're going to go do that, because a lot of it is coming back to this in the moment response, working from the present situation, dealing with any distractions or detours that come up along the way in plans, and also intuitively what's going on. This may make sense on one level. It may sound rational, but it may not really be that. And my instincts are saying that's not safe to go into. So maybe we need to hold back just a little bit. Maybe we need to have a little patience. And he's done this a lot, Trump has. Let's just be patient. Let's see what they do first. And let's see what action they decide to take. So a lot of this aspect, and so you can't tell somebody when you're working intuitively, you're very much like, okay, this is what I feel right now. And then, 10 minutes later, 2 days later, you may go, okay, now it's time. That's that intuitive action. So it's not going to necessarily, again, all make sense to people, and we have to keep that in mind. They know things, they are sensing things, they are working with information we don't have. So we have to be patient and let things unfold so that we can see the bigger piece, see that puzzle come together as those different pieces come together and integrate in. So we gotta ride with it. We just gotta ride with it, flow with it. We're going to see actions taken again more around health, self-care things, partnerships. I think, again, I've had this come up. Now, maybe my intuition is way off. I don't know. But I think there's got to be something that's getting worked out, whether it's in healthcare systems or other components, um, insurance plans or whatever it is that are coming out that are going to support more preventative care. I think we could see more of this integration between of holistic and healthy options into insurance plans, into healthcare plans. Again, it's much cheaper. It's much cheaper for somebody. Let's say you have somebody and they go to a massage therapist and the health plan works out a deal and that massage therapist is going to get paid $100 and they can go once a week and get that massage, chiropractic work, whatever it is, taken care of. Okay, so that's an output of $400 a month. Okay, over the course of a year, that's $4,800 basically. Um, or actually about 5,200 because you're counting by weeks. So say $5,200 output for a year. So over 10 years, let's say, you've spent $50,000. Okay, 50, a little more than $50,000, but we'll, you know, $52,000 over 10 years. Okay, that is like one night in a hospital or, expensive tests that come through that have to be done. And if that prevents the disease, okay, you've saved a heck of a lot of money, as opposed to somebody ending up in the hospital. If you can get them on a nutrition plan and that keeps them from having cancer or diabetes or heart issues or whatever else in there, and you pay for them to work with a nutritionist, with a reflexologist, or things like that to help detoxify their system and do lymphatic drainage, way cheaper, way cheaper. And how many people can be employed in that industry as a result of that? And so then your healthcare costs go way down because you don't have these people going in for all these tests and medical things. And maybe they do a checkup every year versus all of these different medical treatments and prescriptions and pharmaceuticals and tests and this and that. Do those things have a place? Yes, there's a time and a place for those things. But if the emphasis is put on health and preventative care, a lot of those things aren't needed. So I think we're going to see more of an integration coming in. Now, the last 2 days, the actions are going to be showing probably a lot of blocks, a lot of obstacles, a lot of things having to be adjusted because of ethical components. It's like, okay, we could go do A, B, C, or D, but they're not really ethical. And, so there's going to be blocks thrown on them because they're not ethical in one way or another. So we could see that there has to be a focus on doing the right thing over, over approval of seeking approval for others. So, something might make somebody look good in a societal standing, but it may not be the right thing. Think of these many organizations. Take a company like St. Jude's, or now I'm not saying that they haven't helped people. Don't anybody go on a wild rampage, okay? I'm not saying they don't help people, but there's a lot of corruption in these businesses. So you may have people that make some big donation or some big celebrity comes out and speaks for that organization. And it makes them look good, like people automatically go, oh, look at how they're saving the animals. Oh, look at how they're caring about children with cancer. But in reality, that business or that organization is actually harming animals. I mean, PETA got busted a while back, several years ago, because of animal cruelty and animal experimentation and other things that they were doing. And here everybody thought, oh my God, PETA's so great. They're saving the animals, And yeah, I'm sure there were ones that they saved, but there were a lot that they killed. And the same thing happens with these other organizations, things like St. Jude's. When you delve into the deeper layers of the organization and the connections behind it, and you find all of these pharmaceutical payoffs, you find all of these other things. We've had the treatment for cancer for years and years and years. It's out there. They just don't want it into the public eye. Why? Because when you start realizing the treatment for things, you start finding out the cause of things. And when you find the cause of things, you find there were some pretty ill-intentioned people behind stuff. So I think this is where it is. Somebody might make a big donation and everybody's going, "Oh, look, that you're such a good person in society. We just raised you to this elite status." Well, we have to set aside being societally accepted for doing the right thing. And this is also going to help us see where certain leaders are and are not. And we have to build value and worth in people and countries and standing strong and not just, seeking acceptance as a powerful person. And I think this is going to be very important because the truly powerful person is the one that makes their people strong. That's the truly confident, the truly powerful person. They're not afraid of their people being strong. Matter of fact, they know a big part of their success is strong people and building people's self-worth and building their value. So I think, again, we could see some more things coming out or talk about things coming out, happening in those last couple of days that are centered around strengthening people, that are centered in a more ethical place. And I think that that may be where some of the sacrifices have to be made. Like, okay, we're going to have to bring an ethical piece in this if we want to make this accomplishment. So definitely going to be there. Looking at thoughts, where's the mindset going to be for this month? The mindset's on how do we create a more enjoyable life? And that's this doesn't mean that they're not paying attention to the important issues, okay? Nobody freak out. Okay? But we also need to consider what creates a more enjoyable life, what allows people to have some fun in their life, what gives them a work home balance. Because we don't really want people working 80 hours a week because then our family units are not being nourished. Our children are not being supported. We end up with a lot of other bigger issues with our children, with drugs, with crime, with different things happening. I think some of this could come around in connection with some of the stuff that Janine Pirro is putting out there, where she's passing things that make parents accountable for minors' actions. Now, I have a little mixed feelings on that because on one hand, I can say, you know what, when teens hit teens and they're at a certain age and they can drive legally, the parent doesn't always have control over them. And a rebel teen is going to go do what they're going to go do. But on the other hand, there's a lot of parents out there who are not being accountable for their children. And it's not all their fault because they're having to work 80 hours a week or 60 hours a week or 3 jobs or whatever it is to just put a roof over their head and feed them. So there's this balancing piece in there. And I think the thought is going to be, how can we get people to a point where they aren't having to work this and they can have quality time, and they can have a day off, and they can go out and have some fun, and there can be this work-life balance being restored? How do we restore that? How can we give them a break? Because when they get a break, they can be inspired, they can be renewed, they'll come back to their job, they'll put more into their job, they'll be more productive when they're not burned out. So I think that's going to be a big thing that's being pondered, what can be done to help in that direction. Because again, when you've got two parents and all the adults are out working 60, 80 hours a week, who's taking care of the kids? You're sacrificing something of so much value, not just, personally, but also as a country in that. Also, we're going to see a lot of thought being given around again, we've got to give a lot of thought around those using urgency and fear, which I mentioned earlier, like who with the Ebola, the pushing all of this fear. Boy, you better go out and get that vaccine right now. Boy, we got 6 more vaccines we just rolled out. Like, I mean, they're promoting it like we've got 6 new fancy phones that just came out. You got to get the latest one. You know, it's insanity. It really is insanity. And there's all these people going, oh my God, there's one case in the entire United States and they're in isolation. We better all go get something, We can't, this is not thinking about what we're doing. We have to stop and think and go, okay, out of hundreds of millions of people, there's one person who is sitting in isolation away from everybody else. This isn't a fear. This isn't a thing we need to all go into some big panic about and urgently rush out and do things that aren't good for us. So we got to be careful of that. That's going to be some of the mind games going on. Um, the key is going to be seeing who can work in a very innocent way. And innocent is sort of a purity. Um, Innocent is approaching things with an open mind, but not naive. I think we see this, again, like him or hate him, Trump tends to do this. He'll go in and he'll ask people questions. He already knows the answers most of the time. He already knows what's going on, but he'll be innocent about it. Well, what's important to you? What has to happen for you? So there's an innocence there, even when he's not naive about things. And that's the other thing. This is where solutions come from. Again, thinking of trying bigger things that maybe we couldn't have done before. So we're going to see some things where maybe our country wasn't strong enough to implement things before, and now we're able to start thinking about doing those things. So I think there might be some new ideas coming through during June, bigger things that we can move on to. And I think some of those things may be exciting for people to think about. Also, how do we help others to be strong? Again, coming back to that factor, how do we help other people? How do we help our people in general to be strong people? To be, when we look at strong, to be healthy, to be able to take care of themselves, to be, self-sufficient, to have good family life, to have balanced life, all of these things that create their strength to be healthy. And I think there's going to be components coming up of even in this of helping to set other countries up to take their country back. We see this, and we know Cuba's on there. Denmark might be on the list to do that. I'm thinking there are aspects of Canada that are thinking about coming into the US. Um, so there's all kinds of different things. So there may be a sort of mentoring process that goes on during this month of teaching people how to be successful, showing people what to do. Look, if you want this freedom in your country, if you want these certain things, here are the steps you're going to have to take. Now, we can't come over and take those steps for you. We can't do it for you. You've got to do the work. And it's that same thing. If we're going to be strong, nobody can make us strong. They can only give us the opportunities for us to make ourselves strong. And that's what we're going to be looking at. Now, I always like to look at the soul energy. That's the third component in here. And from the 1st through the 13th, and the soul energy is really, it's that conscience. Where are people working from a conscience? Where are they working in divine alignment? Where are they working from morals and ethics and values and different pieces like that? And what are those sort of more soulful pieces that have to be considered and integrated? So if people are going to be successful right now, they're going to have to create and build compassionate relationships. They're going to have those strong partnerships that I talked about at the beginning of the video. They're going to have to be nourishing peace and calm, and showing that they care for others, right? You can't just do all of this stuff with no caring or concern for people. It's like you don't just go, like I said earlier, you don't just go in and wipe out a welfare system, because there's actually people that need it, and you need to be compassionate towards the people that have real needs. I hear some of these younger people, I'll say, some of them millennials, some of them, Gen Z coming in going, well, you don't never need Social Security. You should never need retirement. Well, these people don't know what it's like to hit a certain age and not be able to do things. They're thinking from their youthful self who isn't restricted by anything. And I guarantee you, they're going to have some hard lessons hit them, the people that are saying this, smack them in the face when they get a little bit older and they can't do anything and they can't work and they can't earn a living. If you wipe that system out, your issues and problems and health and safety, as far as diseases and sanitary things and all of this stuff, is going to be massive issues if you're trying to force people to work at 80 years old or 70 years old, um, all of these different things in there. So I think, again, we have to really look at what's going to provide people with more peace, with more calm. What is going to bring ease? This is also part of that quality of life, part of work-life balance in there. So there has to be that compassionate piece. We have to show that we care for others. We can remove fraud without removing the resources from the people who need it. Same type of thing. So this compassion, this caring. It's a reminder that yes, we're going to have challenges. These systems have challenges. Our budget has challenges. Our resources has challenges. But our spirit is stronger than that. And I think this is where it comes back to, again, making people strong enough to run their country, to to have good leaders in, to hold out for that, to stand up. So it's kind of like the American spirit is stronger than the corruption and the criminal syndicates. Now, did people get weak for a while? Do we have challenges because of that? Absolutely. But if we hold on to that spirit, the foundations that we were built on, we will overcome that corruption because the very foundations of that spirit and was designed to clear out the corruption, to not allow it to take roots. Well, we allowed it to take roots because we got lazy, because we got too relaxed, because there were a lot of poor decisions, because there was infiltration, because of a lot of different components that came into the picture. But now, we have to be strong enough. The reality of it is that spirit is stronger than that corruption. And this is why we're able to start taking our country back. This is why countries can get returned to the people. They can get out of the hands of the corrupt leaders. There's always going to be probably some there in some form. That's just a reality. But if our strength is stronger, if our compassion for people and one another is stronger, then we will definitely be able to keep that in check and overcome any challenge that is put in our path. So even if we see the challenges come up, we're stronger than them. And that's what we want to keep in mind. Past people and things are resurfacing during these first 2 weeks. Some of that may trigger reactions for people, like old divisive issues that were used to create conflict and hate in people. And right now, during this time, we have to just make sure we're not going back and rehashing a lot of old issues. I think old issues are going to be brought up again because you know, every month we move forward, we're going to move closer and closer to those midterm elections. And there's a lot starting to play into that and a lot of the agendas to influence those elections on both sides of the fence. Are are starting to be activated. And so what we need to look at is, again, who's in that ethical action, who's staying with legal and ethical action and not reacting. And the law is on our side, our Constitution is on our side. But we have to use it and we have to take action through that as opposed to just reacting and fighting and being in this division because that gets us nowhere. Matter of fact, that breaks us down further. So there is power in legal and ethical action in there. So looking at that and just as people with each other, it's great to have discourse with people online. It's great to have discussions. It's good to present different pieces of information and look at them and have conversations. But we don't want to let it divide us because that's when we get conquered. We don't want it to create hate in us over these things. We can say, look, I don't agree with you, but I don't have to hate you either because you have a different opinion. I'm sure people who have very different views than me have some very valid points and things to consider and what that will do. We need to clear our triggers with forgiveness and unconditional love. So if we're sitting in all these triggers and all this hate and all of this division, okay, we can't progress on to a favorable future because we're holding on to these past grudges and these past resentments and we're seeking revenge. But when we deal with our triggers and we deal with the things that we don't like, because honestly, there's a lot of things, no matter what side of the fence you're on, that you need to look at that you're not going to like. And we have to deal with those triggers and figure out how we're going to deal with them and face them. We need to have forgiveness. People may have made a bad decision in the past, but that doesn't mean they're still sitting in that bad position. And we need to approach things with unconditional love. So we could see second chances being happen. Maybe somebody who stepped away from their position may come back in, either in that capacity or a different capacity. We could see pardons happening. We could see people who we might not think deserve a second chance. But we need to forgive those people if they've had a change of heart. We need to come into unconditional love where maybe people got sucked into something and they didn't know it was wrong. You look at a lot of people in these different organizations, even things like the American Red Cross or different things like that. You've got a lot of people employed in these organizations. They don't know the corruption that's in there. They don't know what's happening in their organization. They just want to do good things in the world. But maybe they got swept up in bad circumstances. So I think there will probably be some pardons or something during that time, or again, this resurfacing. But if it's issues and things that are trying to create conflict, we need to be very careful of that. On the last 2 weeks with the soul energy components that we have, lots of unexpected upheaval, turbulence, drama coming up. So again, what starts off as a friendly disagreement or differences of opinion could really get blown out, especially if we start reacting. If we start reacting, that can lead to all-out battles in things between people, between parties, between countries, between states, whatever it is. There can be all kinds of unexpected upheaval. We can expect the drama to get amplified, which is amplified by those people who are not standing in divine alignment, who are not working in a conscience. They're working with these criminal or corrupt networks of people. They're going to be the ones that are creating the drama and the trauma in there. And, again, it could play out two different ways. We can see it happen either we're going to see it probably happen in the extremist places, because it will either be those who are creating it and supporting all the corruption, or it will be in those areas that are trying to fight the corruption really strongly. It won't necessarily be in the middle ground areas of things. We need to stay calm. We need to remain flexible. We need to be able to adjust things. We talked about that already, working more intuitive, being more present, having to deal with things that come up, and possibly having some detour or some delays in plans in order to take care of other things. So we've got to remain calm. We've got to remain flexible. We don't want to let ourselves get swept into this drama. Part of what may work in these situations was we may see then things get broken into smaller pieces just so there can be some progression being made, as opposed to things being totally halted. The conscience, like, okay, well, let's get this piece done, even if we can't get everything done. And I think that will be there. Again, operating more by intuition and not logic. So when things come up, your intuition naturally kicks in when you are in survival circumstances. That happens like when you have a storm going on or anything like that. Your intuition will say, go here, not there. If we're listening to it. So again, we'll see who's working in that space. And again, things may not make sense, but there may be a bigger piece of consciousness going on. They may be trusting their instincts, and that may be the very thing that saves lives over creating devastation. So we're going to see a lot of that, and it's not all going to make sense again, until the pieces come together. And lots of misunderstandings, miscommunications. So we've got to be careful of this. We all misspeak at times. Sometimes we just don't get the right word out. We've got to be careful of that. We don't want to be in heavy judgment, attacking people. I think Trump gets misunderstood a lot. He'll say something, maybe he'll say it to trigger somebody, to send a message to somebody. Yeah, he does choose words very carefully on one hand, but on another hand, I think that sometimes when he's talking about something, people take it in a way that it was never intended. They distort it into something that it's not meant because he's talking from a language of somebody that was born a long time ago, and that's not the same language that is used today. And so, those language barriers, those generational barriers or whatever, they can misinterpret things very easily or misunderstand something, taking it one way and it wasn't even about that. So we need to be very careful of that. We need to be willing to have the patience to understand what somebody actually means versus just maybe what comes out of their mouth at the time. Um, we also have to be careful about headlines being misrepresented. I think we could see a lot of things in the news. And again, people who are very conscious are going to say, uh, and working in divine alignment, it's going to be like, we realize he said that, but we understand that this is what was meant. We understand that when he said this, this is what he was talking about. We also have to be careful of those who are not working with a conscience, tied to the corruption networks, a lot of our mainstream media channels, and a lot of our truther communities and these other, you know, independent influencers out there who come back and they will be making headlines to seem like something they're not. Oh my, it's like things over, Trump not attending his son's wedding. For example, there were things that came up, there were things he had to deal with. He put his obligations as the president of the United States above his son's wedding. But, if you listen to some of the things out there, the mainstream media would like you to think that he hates his son and his new daughter-in-law or something like that, or something else. For all we know, there could have been assassination attempts that were planned or scheduled, and he changed his plans at the last minute to avoid those things. I mean, there are so many things we don't know. We've got to let go of the judgments during this time, and we've got to take into account that a lot of these things probably will be misspoken, either intentionally or unintentionally. So we have to really look at what things are and not just the words that are spoken. Things that are signed during this time, agreements that are made probably are going to have to be adjusted along the way. They may not stick exactly as they are. We're probably going to see a lot of storm, natural disaster stuff coming up during those last 2 weeks of June. I think a lot of that stuff is going to be manipulated, at least the really harsh stuff. June is a month where there's always storms. You're not going to go through the Midwest of the United States and not run into tornadoes in June. It's a reality. It's the way it is. You're not going to be in a place like Arizona and not have monsoons to deal with in that month. That's a given. But some of the really heavy, devastating stuff, um, I think we could see could be much worse. I think it could be weaponry that's being used in that, weather manipulation. It could be weather trying to balance itself. And this can include not just storms like tornadoes or hurricanes or rainstorms or floods or something like that. It can include tsunamis, it can include earthquakes, it can include volcanic activity. So I think we're going to see a lot of earth stuff being activated. And the more we're using, whether it's directed weapons or laser technology or different things that influence the earth, even fires. We know a lot of fires are that are happening. Probably a lot of the ones in California are not natural. Some of them are, some of them aren't. And those things may just get out of hand along the way. So that is going to be another piece, and that's going to be another piece that can affect people soulfully on things. And again, bringing them into their conscience. Where's the conscience of the people that are doing this? This is a crime against humanity, if you want to get down to it. We need to learn to appreciate what we have and nourish balance and freedom. So looking at how to create and nourish values. Um, Again, supporting families, connection to nature, having the ability to do some travel, to have some vacations, to have some breathing space, to have a day of rest. So again, I think we're going to see more things coming up around this. In this factor of how do we make these adjustments? I think, again, this aligning with more natural rhythms. We weren't designed to work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. We were designed to have a day of rest. I think more things coming up around, yeah, let's not have construction workers starting at 5 o'clock in the morning on something, um, in a residential neighborhood, for example. Now, there's always adjustments that have to be made, right? Because you have to then weigh out, can those construction workers do their job in the middle of the day when you're in Arizona and it's 120 degrees? You know, that's not necessarily a feasible thing either. So trying to balance this out, but I think more and more this consideration for things, I think, we've already started to see it. There's little things I see popping up about daylight savings time again. Um, Stopping that. Certain states, Florida anyways, is putting that up for consideration right now. Um, because it puts us back again in natural rhythms. When we do these things like daylight savings time, it throws off our natural rhythms. We're working out of synchronicity with nature on those things. When we are working constantly and we don't take breaks and we don't have our winter breaks and honor our holidays or things like that. We're just working all the time through them. We're losing that connection with our natural rhythms, our synchronicities. That then cascades into health issues. That then cascades into physical and mental issues. That cascades into, um, collective health issues. It just can go on and on. And again, then that puts a bigger strain on the system because then you have people that have a harder time working. So, really, if people are in health and they're getting these breaks and they're getting this peace of mind and they're getting the balance in their life, they can probably have longer working life, or they can probably have a healthier existence up until they die. So again, lots of components working in here, and lots of things happening on one hand, and on another hand, it may feel like nothing is happening. And this is where we've just got to embrace the journey. There's so much to get from the journey of things. There's so much from going through the process, because that's where we're really learning about things. That's where we're understanding things. That's where we are um, realizing everything that's going on and things that we need to pay attention to in our personal lives, in our communities, in our world, all of these different components, um, and looking at these different things and riding with the ebbs and the flows, and when we do that, things actually end up getting smoother. They actually find their flow instead of all of this resistance. We can actually remove a lot of the challenges just by coming into the rhythms, just by having some patience, just by embracing the process and realizing, absolutely, I want this done in a way that it's not going to come back, or at least not come back for a really long time. I want to do this in a way that really is going to be in integrity. I want to do this in a way that really is going to support a favorable future. And to do that, we're going to have to take our time with it. On one hand, we don't have a lot of time to work with. On another hand, we need to do it right. Not just brush through things and then have them all fall apart. We got to have the pieces in place. And it's through going through the whole process that we come to understand why things have to be done. And we are on an incredible journey. And sometimes that journey is rough. And sometimes we had storms, but sometimes it is absolutely amazing. And when we reflect back on it, it's going to be like, wow, think of the things we've been through and gone through. I think about that at my age now. I think back and I go, wow, the differences, the changes, and every generation will do that when they hit a certain age in life, and they'll look back and go, wow, this is really something to be living through. And each generation will have their things that they will live through. So with that, I hope you all have a great month. Thank you for hanging in there with me. Again, head over to my website. Again, you can pick up my book, The Code Journey, over at compassioncodes.com. And that link is also in the show notes for you, where you can connect in with me. Leave a comment, like the channel, like the videos, share it out. I can use all the help I can get, and I appreciate it. And I will see you all next month with what will be coming in then. Take care, everyone.